Jake, I'll get to the delegation, but I do want to bring you some news that we've just learned as Air Force One has landed. This is what a White House official told the reporters who were on the Air Force One traveling with the president from Washington here to Alaska, which is that one-on-one meeting that we were expecting to happen between President Trump and President Putin, that Caroline Leavitt confirmed to me the other day was the plan going forward, is now no longer happening. There is no longer going to be a one-on-one, and what we are told by a White House official is that this will now be a 3-on-3, meaning 3 members of the U.S. delegation and 3 members of the Russian delegation as well. And what we are told by the White House is that President Trump will be joined in that 3-on-3 by his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and the Secretary of State and Interim National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio. It's not clear who the other, their counterparts from the Russian side will be that are joining President Putin in that meeting. But that is a huge development here, Jake, in terms of the structure of what this meeting is going to look like. And you've got to look at those 2 voices who are going to be inside the room with President Trump as this goes forward. One, Steve Witkoff, who is no stranger to Vladimir Putin and has met with him at length and actually was in that last meeting with him that set up all of the motion that put in place this meeting happening here today. So he does have a lot of experience with the Russian leader. But then also Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, of course, as a senator in his previous job, took a very hardline stance against Russia, was grilling previous officials on whether or not they believed that Putin was a war criminal during Senate confirmation hearings in Trump's first term. He will also be the other voice that is in the room there with President Trump as he is going to be meeting with President Putin. And so that in and of itself, Jake, is quite notable. No longer a one-on-one. Instead, it will be a 3-on-3 meeting as this summit gets underway here today.
Fascinating stuff. Caitlin Collins, stand by. So that's really interesting because what you have here, I don't want to say Witkoff is pro-Russia. He's not, but he's certainly been assigned to be somebody to get along with Vladimir Putin, to try to negotiate with him, versus Marco Rubio, who still is a hawk when it comes to Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that European leaders are going to be very happy that Marco Rubio is sitting in on that meeting. I think when it comes to Middle Eastern envoy Steve Witkoff, he is the one who kind of sparked this meeting because of his trip to meet with Putin, because he came back and said Putin wanted to meet with you, and he had some details of a potential deal, which really got the ball rolling on this meeting. But again, you know, as Caitlin was mentioning, Marco Rubio has taken a very tough stance in the past on Russia. And when you talk to people who are close to President Trump, it is him still in President Trump's ear, kind of poking at him when it comes to Putin. And we've seen, obviously, Trump shift on this as well.
Even thinking back to the first administration, there were times, for instance, when Putin and Trump met solo in his first administration, when there were concerns even from inside Trump's own administration about what Trump might say or agree to, or how he might be swayed by the Russian president without others around him.
Or even what Putin might falsely claim was said, and there's no other witness other than Trump.
Exactly, and that's deliberate, right? Because you want to have multiple witnesses so that you put your own, read out your own spin on it. But that the deliberate show of force is significant, and it seems to be...
President Trump is heading this morning to Alaska for that meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The two will meet in Anchorage to discuss a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. They will then hold a joint press conference. This is Putin's first time in the United States since 2015. Yesterday, Putin expressed his optimism about the summit, telling his advisors the Trump administration is making, quote, energetic and sincere efforts to stop the crisis and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved. Russian officials are also expecting to discuss potential economic ties with the U.S. and an end to the Kremlin's exile from the Western financial system. President Trump was asked about the deal he might strike with Mr. Putin yesterday.
Are you prepared to offer Vladimir Putin access to rare minerals to incentivize him to end the war?
We're going to see what happens with our meeting. We have a big meeting. It's going to be I think very important for Russia, and it's going to be very important for us, and important for us only that we're going to save a lot of lives. We are spending a lot of time trying to get the war solved. If we can get the war solved, we'll be very happy. As far as rare earth, that's very unimportant relative. I'm trying to save lives. I think it's going to be a good meeting, but the more important meeting will be the second meeting that we're having. We're going to have a meeting with President Putin, President Zelensky, myself, and maybe we'll bring some of the European leaders along, maybe not. I don't know that it's going to be very important. We're going to see what happens. And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along.
So,
David Ignatius, oh, I'm so sorry, Katie. David Ignatius, you hear what the president's saying there about having Zelensky involved. In the second meeting, saying that's the important meeting. I'm curious, what went behind that? Was it consultations with Europe? And what do you take from that?
So, Joe, I'll give you first the optimistic version, and then probably the more realistic and pessimistic version. Trump has agreed now to this two-phase process that will, by his planning, bring Zelensky and Europeans in to discuss the framework that he and Putin have explored. One big question is whether there'll quickly be a ceasefire and then discussions of the details, or agreement on a package, the basic deal points that would precede a ceasefire. The more worrisome scenario is that Putin will make an offer to Trump that Trump will accept, and Trump will then, in effect, try to ram that down the throat of Zelensky and Ukraine. It will be a concessionary agreement that requires Ukraine to give up territory without providing Ukraine the security that it needs after any peace agreement. That's the biggest fear that I hear. We just don't know until the meeting happens which direction Trump will go. Will he be tough with Putin and say, this is the deal, and be prepared to impose sanctions if Putin resists? Or will he accommodate Putin's desires in a hope to have an improved relationship with his person he's expressed a lot of personal rapport with? Trump has, in the last several days, been trying to reassure Europeans who are terrified that it's going to be the second scenario of a diktat, that no, he's prepared to stand with Europe, prepared to stand with Ukraine, not going to abandon Ukraine. Whether those are just words, we're going to find out very quickly.
Katie Kay, it certainly seems that the president has been listening to his NATO allies, and a few have remarked that it's fascinating what a close relationship he's building, not only with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, but also that the administration is building with British leaders right now, and perhaps that is moving the president a bit more toward working with Europe, working with the UK, as they come to a deal here, possibly with Russia.
Yeah, of course, you've had J.D. Vance on holiday with his family in the UK just over the past week, spending a few days with the Foreign Secretary at his private residence, the two families together. That's been seen as a good thing in the British circles. But I think
legitimate progress toward a ceasefire or some progress toward ending the war in Ukraine that Ukraine can accept, then that's how the summit will be judged. But these pictures are being showed all across Russia right now, all across Europe right now, and a leader who has been a pariah has just been greeted on U.S. soil by the American president. Again, if Trump can get for what he's giving, we'll see at the end. But so far, he's giving.
Well, and in this car, this is the opportunity for Putin to say, well, Donald, I understand you want to have a 3-on-3. Of course, that's fine with me, but when are we going to do our one-on-one?
We have a lot, yeah.
They may have this worked out by the time they get out of the car.
There is a lot that's going to, this is not going to be, let me show you the highlights of the Air Force Base type of road trip here. There's going to be a lot that's going to be discussed, a lot in the sense of establishing.
In that car, right?
I don't know President Putin personally, we're not Facebook friends, but he's working them. And he's working them hard in a confined space where he can start to basically soften them up. And I think, I want to go to John's point.
And I want to bring in now Igor Novikov, who is the former advisor to Ukrainian President Zelensky, who is now in Ukraine right now. And Igor, you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening there and how people are feeling inside Ukraine as they're watching what's unfolding in Alaska today. What are you hearing from people on the ground?
Well, if I were a betting man, that would actually bet on Ukraine, because we have no other choice, unlike Trump and Putin. So that's kind of my response to that. But, it's basically a case of cognitive dissonance. There's some hope, but I think the origin of that hope is actually the war fatigue, because it's been going on for years. At the same time, people are too realistic and have seen enough not to expect too much from this meeting. The war will continue one way or the other.
Yeah, and you mentioned the war fatigue. A member of the Ukrainian National Guard told the Washington Post, quote, "I don't know a single person in my unit who wants to keep fighting." And a recent poll from Gallup is showing that 24% of Ukrainians want to keep the fighting until Ukraine wins the war. That's down from 73 in 2022. So morale is low here. What does winning the war look like for Ukrainians at this point?
I don't think there's such thing as winning this war for either side, to be honest, because what Putin wants, he wants the whole of the country and probably the subsequent restoration of the Warsaw Pact, so Eastern Europe as well. If you kind of noticed, his foreign minister is wearing a USSR jumper to the meeting in Alaska, which they think is funny, but we need to remind them what happened to the USSR and why, and that their economy isn't doing much better either at the moment. But at the same time, Ukraine kind of wants to restore its borders to their internationally recognized state from 1991. That doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. So I think, you know, there's a certain kind of amount of stalemate here, and obviously that...
Folks, we should remember that the reason this meeting has extra scrutiny goes back to Zelensky's brilliant decision to get Trump on camera. Remember, that meeting where Trump was berating him, acting like a thug, and you had J.D. Vance sitting in the corner being like, "Have you said thank you, sir? You haven't even said thank you." And the meme came from that with the weird face that they used on South Park even. And then you had Marco Rubio questioning all of his life choices, being like, "Was this worth selling my soul and dignity?" Right? That meeting could have happened, normally would have happened, behind closed doors. And we would have had maybe some reporters in the room, maybe, that would have relayed what happened, and it would have been a story. But without in this modern era, people expect the tapes, right? And they got them there, and that has put Trump under a lot of scrutiny ever since. And indeed, that was one of the moments, one of the many moments early in the Trump presidency that woke people back up, being like, "Oh yeah, this is not only Trump being Trump, this is worse than the first iteration of Donald Trump back in 2017, 2018, and on, right?" And so this whole thing where Trump is now apparently backing down, saying, "Well, I'm not going to have my meeting just purely one-on-one," which is probably a wise decision, but it's driven in part by the fact that allies and American voices alike were furious at that decision. So already Donald is backing down in some ways that indicates that Zelensky's tactics worked.